Instead necessarily the beginning of the video. Oh god, I got up to 78 today.
It's pretty warm out.
So I want to talk about basically the 5 W's and the H of law. I'll try to explain those to you. The way I interpret them is going to be different than anyone else. She does that.
Oh, jeez. I'm moving. I'm moving.
So don't come all the way up. Gear shift is right here. I like that thing. I'm here with Wyatt. We're going to talk about law a bit. So, we'll go over the 5 W's and possibly the H, like the how. Law. How is law?
So what are the 5 W's?
The 5 W's are what, where, when, why, and who.
Does that go in order?
Yeah, I'll try. So, what is law? What do you think law means to you?
Law to me is to keep society stable. It's always been there to regulate some form of people, of government, a way of controlling the uncontrollable, I guess. You know, there's a lot of things implemented to make sure that certain things don't happen. Is obviously what I've been taught throughout school and life.
Yep. Sounds good. I'm going to add on to that and say the actual physical part of law is what is written, and that is everything from the construction and process of how law gets executed through constitutions, our Declaration of Independence, and all the civil codes and statutes on top of that, and then ordinances down to local level. And with that, there's also court forms, which is more legal than law, but it's the process of law, which is what legal is. So court forms are also a part of it. Once you put something on there, it gets recorded, and that can be used in a case later to prove something, then that is technically law too. So you actually can create law yourself. Not a lot of people realize that. It's gone over a lot of things throughout history, but I'll try to cover that later. So the next, I think, is that covered all for what you think?
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's a pretty good
What is law?
coverage of it.
That's all branches of the government are included into that, and that's where a lot of agencies like police department, justice department, everybody up to like the National Guard of the state or the military for the federal level, to execute. So, and my dog is licking my arm. So next is when. What? When is law? Well, if you go to the federal court building that we have here locally, they start their timeline of law at the Hammurabi Code, which is ancient Babylon, and that's where they discuss slaves, how to handle slaves, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth maxims, and all that type of stuff comes from there. And that was just a way for them to structure their society at that point in time. But that's as close to the beginning as we can get for a formal introduction of law. oh God, ancient Babylon is around the same time as Greece, so that could be anywhere from, I want to say 3500 BC to, I forgot when they fell. I think the Roman Empire crushed them. No, the Persian Empire crushed them. So, yes, I don't think they made it into AD. I think they were in, maybe they did make it into AD. I don't know, somewhere in the beginning. And if you look even further back how law came about, you could take it all the way back to tribal law, which is, every native tribe or anything like that has their own timeline where they created their own law. And, they had their own set of rules and who was in charge and all that. So, it's a development of the size of the society, I would say. Because you go from having, let's say, just a family, and you could say your own family has their own law, or whatever, dad's in charge, or mom's in charge, whoever. And then it graduates up to you're in a community, you have your own tribe, your own settlement, And so now you have to come upon agreements of a law system for everybody to work with. Who's going to do what job? What's going to be the punishment if somebody does this? Stuff like that. Because they don't want to just kill somebody, because then they're going to lose man force or somebody to do the work and stuff. So they had to develop that. Yep. And even the shaman of tribes and stuff will say and invoke their own religious law, saying, our God says we have to do this, so that is new law, So it's always kind of been a way to regulate the size of the society. And as societies get bigger and bigger into metropolis type cities that we have now, there's a lot of law. So, but it's gotten to the point, I think, where it's so huge, it's hard to understand, and they don't even teach you enough to be able to be successful.
I really haven't been taught enough to be successful in my own court cases.
Yep.
You would get stated prior, and like even with a traffic violation, there's court documents that you go down to go and test to trial. So.
Yep. And that's going to be something that I bring about in some of my interviews with the judges and stuff that I talk to and whatnot. So, after Babylon, this is all kind of like BC time. Greek kind of were, from what I hear, but I don't see much record of, they were trying to be the first democracy where people rule and majority rules. And it's like everybody in the town would have to vote on something. So they'd have huge gatherings to vote on whether something should become law or not. And the problem with that is, once the population gets too big, it's hard to get everybody to physically vote on something. So, that became a problem for them. And a lot of people say that was their demise and everything. I don't think so. There was a lot more when you look into history on their monarchs and everything that they end up having. After Greece, you got Rome. Rome squashed Greece, and Rome had the Republic. They formed the Republic. That's where you get your senators from, where you still have a military ruler who is an emperor, and you also have a group of individuals who are probably the wealthiest people in the community that are deciding what the law is going to be. And with that structure right there, they still had problems within their kingdom where it was getting divided up between the richest guys of the country, So they had to form...
And the corporations are...
Yep. And they had to form a unified law to merge all the different corporations together so that it could be standardized and controlled better, especially during Justinian's time, which was 500 AD, where he had to merge East and Western European Empire together. So he wrote down civil law, like that's where civil law gets its origins. pause this.
Hey, see if we got audio now.
So, hi. So we'll go straight to the when.
Yep.
All right. So when is law? I think we already covered when, didn't we? We went to the timeline.
It was
What, when, where? We did that. So why?
Why? Yeah, there we go.
All right. Why is law? Why do we have law? What do you think?
Well, back to the car. It's to create that jurisdiction over the people, where they know what they can and cannot do, and where their rights are going to stand. Personally, for me, like the law, with the speed limit, there's a bound limit for something, and there's a bound limit for the people and what they can and cannot do. Mm-hmm. A lot of that being morally just. Murder is obviously not a moral thing. Mm-hmm. That's against the law. You got first, second, third degree murder. Mm-hmm. A lot of it's to create that system for people to abide, and like a lot of people say it's for the sheep, and like to create that, but it's not part of this. It's to have society flow in a morally correct position.
Okay. And to keep everybody publicly safe.
Oh yeah, publicly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's coming back to the community. You can't be worrying about your neighbors doing this stuff. If there was no law, you're gonna have to worry about your neighbor. What is he doing in his basement? Is he cooking meth over there? And it's gonna go on to the guidelines for the neighborhood, the community. Is what it is to me.
All right. Sounds good. I know commerce has to have it a lot to do trade and everything. They got to have a set amount of rules so they can make their deals, and everything is done justly, and you can get more economy flowing.
Right.
Why is law? I think it's just to keep people together, just to make societies work. Before we had it, if we had no law in this country at all, then we would probably be still wandering around, hunting and gathering still, and not having clothes. We'd have to make our own stuff because we have no factories or nothing like that.
It would be completely broken down.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could have even if you say, well, we could get together as communities, blah blah blah. Yeah, but within that community, you're going to make your own law.
Right.
So. And even with family, you're going to have some type of family law. So you would not have a family structure.
A hierarchy. That's where I came from. Dad's first. Dad goes out and dad does what needs to be done. Dad back in the day went out, hunted, gathered. Well, not gathered, but he definitely hunted and provided and built a shelter. Mm-hmm. Did care of the dirty work that wasn't everybody's favorite thing to do. So there's always an established pecking order for whether it's communities or households or
right.
that kind of go-to.
And if something bad happened, some huge chaos happened, who's going to do what? Who's going to protect us? Who's going to go put out that fire? Who's going to do this? Some rules going to have to be put in place so that plans can get developed, just for the safety and security of the people. So I have nothing against law. I think it's highly crucial that we have it, but I think it's got to have its limitations too. So hopefully we'll get to a point where the legal system or the law will agree that once society has reached a certain moral point, it can come off the law a bit, can slow down that runaway train of legislation we have that just constantly makes new laws that you can't even keep up with anymore as a citizen. Alright guys, just me this time. Our recording failed when I was trying to further explain the 5 W's. I was in the middle of the when portion. So now I am going to finish that without Wyatt, unfortunately. He just got me. And the audio failed, that's why I couldn't keep that other recording. But the when, to follow up after Justinian's time in 500 AD in Rome, where we get our civil law, where things are really starting to get written down and codified, standardized to create a much larger society, to control a much larger area, to, get taxation, all this stuff came about most effectively for Rome. So, this was a time where we didn't have courts. There's no arguments. It's just if there was a law written down and the powers that be saw that you didn't obey them, then you were going to pay up the penalty for that, and that's it. Then we have to fast forward to England, which is the next surviving empire. Well, you have France, Spain, and Germany all kind of absorbed that Catholic civil law that followed on from Rome. But England, however, started to implement new rules to law. They didn't like having a Roman Pope telling them what to do, and that the Pope was in charge of the country. The King of England was very against that. So it was all on feudalism, all the countries where, the kings owned everything. But the barons, like the big landowners, the big corporation owners of England, felt like they weren't getting enough power to do what they want to do with the land they had. And so they revolted against the king back in 1215 AD, and forced him to sign the Magna Carta, which in it says that the rule of law, and that is where any law that is written must be followed by everyone, not only the person that wrote it, but the king himself, whoever. So that's the rule of law. I don't think they had a parliament yet, so I think the Magna Carta helped set up courts and a parliament, which is basically like a representation of the public to, help make decisions and stuff like that, just like Congress and Senate for Rome, stuff like that. But we were getting courts. We're finally getting courts in England. So we can start arguing law. We can start bringing in circumstances. We can start bringing in witnesses, testimony, cross-examination, stuff like that. Now, if it's against the king, good luck. You're not going to be able to have an argument whatsoever. But if it's against another person, now you can have your argument and we can get things settled. And they started making rules for that. So, we now have courts, England, 1215 and up. Then fast forward to the American Revolution from England, where we got tired of the feudalism here. We wanted to own our own property. We were getting tired of a king across the seas making rules for us to tell us what we have to do when it doesn't even really apply, and still overtaxing us and, just making things very difficult to thrive in America, to where, again, the heads of corporations, the heads of states that were within the colonies revolted against the king and wrote the Declaration of Independence, which explains the reasons why we separated from England and declared ourselves sovereign to all other nations in the world. So we were literally becoming our own country. And it was really 13 countries that we were separating from the world, because each state was its own sovereign entity. There was no main federal government overreaching everything. So that's not until the Articles of Confederation, which came about after that. And also want to include that in the Declaration of Independence, it mentions natural law, human rights, and stuff like that. So this is a step above what everybody had in England. Now we want the government to recognize the rights of the people and start limiting government power. So natural law is basically things that happen naturally. You see, things in nature don't really live in excess. They take what they need to survive, and that's it. That's one way I look at it. All your rights, they say all your rights come from you from natural birth. You were born sovereign, which is true, but if you can't get everybody else to recognize your rights or respect your rights, then there's no point of saying you have rights. So, natural law. Mark Passio explains it very good online, but definitely the law of nature. Just if it doesn't seem moral, then it's not natural. You know, us as a society, we have to be moral for each other in order for a society to work. Otherwise, it's just going to be us killing each other and being selfish and stealing from each other, and you're not going to have an abundant society. You're just going to have a bunch of riffraff running around not obeying anything. And society's not going to get very big. So, we have the Articles of Confederation, which is basically a treaty between the sovereign states. And back then, they weren't states. Well, they were when we declared independence. They went from colonies to states, and those states were all Confederate. Every single one was a Confederate state. It was part of a confederation. So, look up the Articles of Confederation, and it basically just displays how trade should be conducted between the states. There wasn't that many rules to it. So it's not a very big document, and there was like a president that was like a spokesperson of, you know, the Confederation, but there was no federal funding. There was no big federal centralized government, so all the states were... So the states were all sovereign, and they were fighting each other. Each state was its own country, basically, throughout the Articles of Confederation. So even though they had a treaty between them, it was hard for them to be together as a unified force against the other powers of the world. Now, 10 years after revolting and many disputes between the states, the founding fathers got gathered together and they drafted the United States Constitution, which is a reflection of Maryland's Constitution, I believe it was. And a constitution is basically a formalized plan of how the government is to be structured and how it is to operate. Not very definedly, but very structurally, very generally. So, with that, the code or statutes that gets applied afterwards cannot contradict the Constitution, because the Constitution is the way the government's supposed to work. So if they make a law that violates the way the government's supposed to work, it's null and void. Now, when you get to so the timeline for all these are Declaration of Independence, 1774. By 1776, we have our independence in America, and we have the Articles of Confederation, I believe 1776 also, all the way up till 1789, I believe, was when the United States Constitution was drafted and entered into Congress as one of the first acts of Congress. And after that, I think each state had their own laws and stuff, so there's no federal statutes that I can see. I know there was acts of Congress that were put into place, but I didn't see a codified structure of the federal law until the 1950s, which is a very convenient time period when you look at how land ownership changed. Because in the 1850s, right about Lincoln's time, the land was held in patent under allodial title, which means the individual owned that land. That was their land. Even if it was granted by the government, or if it was patented by the government, or warranted, or something like that, it was still the government's permission or whatever to the individual that they could own that land. And my camera keeps dying on me. I don't know what's doing it. Keeps shutting the video off when I'm recording. So bear with me. There's going to be a lot of editing in this. So we got our timeline down. That's the when. And it's still happening. So all the way till present. You've got representatives meeting in Congress to discuss laws that they've drafted. And, it's up to the president if they want to veto it. And all this stuff. So it's still going on. So now we got the when. I discussed the where before, but I'm going to have to redo it because that got cut out also. So where is law? Law is up at your Capitol building locally in the state, or up at the U.S. Capitol building, where they create law, civil law, either for federal government or for this individual states. Then you have the courtrooms where an event happened, and now something has to be resolved because of it. So laws being challenged, and we'll see how well it plays out. Alright, law is also with you. You are law also. So you have the ability to create your own contracts. I could set up my own rental or a lease contract for my house for a roommate. I can, I can join or merge with another person in matrimony, making a legally binding merger. So you can set up accounts, you can set up contracts, you can set up mergers. You can create your own rules, and as long as somebody agrees to it, signs by it, and it's recorded and acknowledged, then you just create a law. And that's basically contract law. So I think contract law is one of the most important to learn out of all laws, because without it, nothing else sticks. Not the Constitution, not civil law, not ordinances, and that's another place where township halls create local ordinances. That's another place where law gets made. Catholic Church has their own canon law. The Quran has its own law. The Torah has its own